Hi, this is Satya Bharti and welcome to another edition of W3M or Weekly Rev with Mike. Mike, this has been a crazy week. The biggest story of the week was that SUSE is acquiring Rancher Lab, but we have already covered it. We had a very good analysis with Rob. But if I'm not wrong, you have some really exciting pieces there. Something to do with Twitter, something to do with Amazon, something to do with Oracle. So tell us, what is your first pick of the day? Oh, yeah. Or of the week, actually.
So it's raining here on the East Coast. I heard it might have been a tropical storm. So this is not too bad. Still got some good artificial light. But yeah, there were a couple of good stories this week, and I think you're right. The SUSE stuff sort of took precedence over everybody else. The rancher news, and I think a lot of people were trying to figure out what it meant. Overall tone was that it was fairly positive for Rancher, and obviously positive for SUSE. So that'll be fun to watch. One of the things that that I also keyed off of that jumped out at me this week was an announcement by Oracle. They continue to try and to appear cloudy. Lindsay Clark at the Register reported on Big Red's new on-premises cloud product, something that they are calling, let me make sure I get this right, Oracle Dedicated Region Cloud at Customer. I don't know who was paid to come up with that name, or whether they just threw a bunch of words together and forgot to change it on the PowerPoint. But it's a heck of a name. It's expensive, right? Like most things that Oracle does, it's expensive. It starts at something like $500,000 per month, according to Lindsay's sources. It's something requiring like a $6 million commitment. And I've been battling them, Oracle since way back in my DB2 days at IBM. And the thing is, they're always an enterprise threat, right? They're entrenched. There's a lot of data that lives in there. They're never the cheapest in the room, but they're always there. So this one's going to be a fun one to watch. They've made some big hires on the editorial side, pulling some ex-journalists on over. So their storytelling ability is going to get a little bit better, I would expect. And this becomes it's Oracle, right? It's Big Red.
Staying in the cloud front, Docker has joined hand with Amazon Web Services or AWS to simplify the lives of developers by allowing them to focus on application development, streamlining the process of deploying and managing containers in AWS from their local development environment. As you know, Docker has shifted its position. They have sold their enterprise business altogether to Mirantis, and now they are focusing on what they originally were, a platform for developer to work locally, but easily move that to the cloud. So as they work together, Docker and AWS have created an integrated and frictionless experience for developers to leverage Docker Compose, Docker Desktop, and Docker Hub to deploy their apps on Amazon's Elastic Container Service or Amazon ECS and Amazon ECS on AWS Fargate.
I'm going through some of my tabs, and there was a interesting thread that everybody likes to jump onto this week on some Twitter news, right? It's Twitter. Everybody wants to see what they're doing. And they had accidentally, apparently, given how fast it was pulled down and adapted, put a job posting out for engineers that were to work on a project called Codename Griffin, that would tie together their subscription and payment businesses. So sounds like what Twitter is potentially floating and working on would be something very Twitch and Patreon like. To where people would be able to create subscriptions, create newsletters, create gated access to their Twitter streams, and then receive payment. Nobody knocks any company for trying new things, although one could argue this one isn't really new, given that Medium's tried it, Twitch has tried it, Patreon's tried it. But what really jumps out at me on this one again and man, I've been on Twitter since early days at South by Southwest. I don't care not to think about the number of years that I've been on there. But in all those years, Twitter still hasn't found what it is. Never has. Not sure that it ever will. They keep chasing this advertising model, right? This Facebook-like model. Almost like the middle kid chasing after their older brother, trying to live up to him. They don't want to accept that what Twitter is different. It's not Facebook. It's not even a social network. It's more like an interactive wire service. And what we need, what's needed is they need to realize that they're bigger, right? They play a more important role in society than simple clicks or hollow ad dollars. I continue to hold out hope. I know there are a lot of us out there that continue to hold out hope. Maybe we're just the RSS mafia that's out there, that want to do that. But I yearn for the days that Twitter says, yes, we are not chasing all this stuff. We're just going to be that pipe of news. So this will be interesting to watch.
Yeah, even I am kind of curious what they're, because it's like there's a lot of vagueness around there. Because the job description also said that they are building a payment platform that can be used by others. So does that mean it's something similar to PayPal? Which can be used internally because it's a kind of micro blog platform, microtransaction platform where there are millions of users. What if let's hypothetically, let's say Trump is there, he has 80 millions or whatever followers. Suddenly he wants donations, so you can use Twitter's platform to make payments or make donation directly instead of going to a third party. So it could also be that a platform that will be used internally by Twitter. Like also, I'm a paid Twitter customer. So what you can do is by paying, you may also get access to additional features like much more advanced analytics that who is actually using it, or you may get more curated feeds, or you may get a feed which doesn't have any sponsored post there. So we really don't know what they are planning to do with this payment and subscription service, but they are definitely building a platform within Twitter which will enable a model for, of course you can always be a subscriber, but it will be a paid subscriber and some kind of payment transaction service.
Twitter is bigger than what Twitter actually is, right? Its community, its users, they drive it, right? It's been something that, no matter what they do, it still lives on, right? It's become like air. It's become a utility. I've always argued that the best buyer for Twitter would probably be somebody like an old school telco that knows infrastructure, that knows all of the regulatory challenges. They've gone through the ringer on a lot of that stuff, and they know how to operate a utility like service. Could you imagine even just not having Twitter? Like, it's easy to imagine not having Facebook. I deleted my account earlier, gone. But Twitter, couldn't imagine that. The serendipitous connections that you make, the information that you find, the speed at which you're able to get news, the control that you're actually allowed to have on it. Something that Marshall Kirkpatrick at Sprinkler has advocated for years is the power of Twitter's lists. To be able to control your the fire hose of feed that you get in there. So there's so much to it, and I love what you were saying about the ability to do payments, because when you mention the political aspect of having such a large following and then being able to give them something in a Patreon like manner, imagine for a nonprofit what that could do, right? I'm a nonprofit with 5 million followers, $1 a year. All of a sudden, I've just increased my budget by $5 million, and that's a PR guy doing math. So somebody may want to double check that. That becomes really interesting. our friends in open source and a lot of the projects in open source. How do you support them? Everybody's on Twitter, right? And it's a cup of coffee to be able to support your project on that. What kind of impact does something like that have on a Git or on on any other of the repositories when you start to think about where communications are happening? I just love it. I love the space. I think it's so much fun to see where it's going and how much potential is still there.
Since we're talking social media, and I'm heavily into VR and AR. Facebook has showed a lightweight VR headset, which is kind of they have only done a proof of concept, but it's really exciting because it has a display which is only 8.9 millimeter in thickness. I mean, look at the Oculus Quest, Oculus Rift, and Sony VR have. They are bulky sets. They are still better, but bulky sets. Now they're talking about something which is much more slim. What they are doing is they are combining the power of holographic optics and polarization-based optical folding to create the world's thinnest VR headset for Facebook. It's more or less look like a pair of sunglasses, something we were expecting Google would do, but they did not do that. And I think in the VR space, Google has totally moved out of it. Microsoft has moved out of it with the HoloLens. I think Facebook and Apple are the only ones who will do something in the VR space. What they're also doing is they're improving the resolution. So unlike the current headset that have box-like form factors and provide only a fraction of the resolution of a human eye, Facebook proposed technologies with laser illumination, directional backlighting, and color multiplexing to achieve the field of view and resolution, which is not near what we see, but it's close to what the human eye sees. So I'm really excited about the VR space. And I think with Apple getting totally into that, 2021 is going to be an exciting year for VR, especially with this COVID-19, where a lot of work, we are moving remote, we are moving to home, to get that feel where you can be at home, but you feel like you are in an office setting, or you can have interactive session with your client, with your customer, or with the community members in a VR world. I think that's going to be an exciting year.
I think you're right. I think we're definitely going to start to see a lot more accelerated movement there. You want to see it from a Microsoft. You want to see it from from a Google that have the engineering chops. I'm still not sold on that. I want to see VR from Facebook. Stay in your lane on this, right? They're an advertising company, right? That's what Facebook is, and I don't necessarily want to see. I mean, I'm clearly not their target audience. I've abandoned them, and that's sort of where the next story jumped in. Mike Isaac at the New York Times covered the results or the findings of the audit that Facebook did, that they had done on their policies around discriminatory posts and on how they're protecting people. And by their own admission, they failed massively. I mean, no shock to anybody that's paying attention, but they failed massively. They've shown who they are, right? It still boggles my mind. It's a mystery to me that people are still on Facebook. They've shown who they are. They've shown how damaging they can be to democracy, to people's mental health, to society in general, and it's baked into their business model. I mean, it's baked in there. So it's worth. They can do the studies. They can give a lot of lip service to it. Rumor has it that they're not going to make any changes till after the election. Shocking, I know. So yeah, that's sort of one of the stories that jumped out at me this week as we're talking about Facebook. So when I hear that they're going to be going into VR, technologically great, awesome, go for it. Let's see what happens. Trust that they're going to do it right and that they're not going to use that data and do it ethically. Zero.
Just like any other big company, Facebook acquired Oculus to kind of continue their VR journey. And I hear your concern about Facebook. And the problem here is that I follow a lot of people on Facebook, and one of the reasons I'm active is that my family on Facebook, so it makes it easier to stay connected. It's just virtually impossible to send mails to 100 people. Indian families are large, big families, and a picture high resolution to 100 people, and they all be able to watch them and comment them. That's not virtually possible. So they have made it easier. The original idea of Facebook was great, but gradually, I think I don't know who said that, but it was like either you die young as a hero or live long enough to become a villain or something like that. So that is the same thing that happened with Facebook, and there are a lot of people who actually are critic or Facebook, but they are on Facebook because that's where the audience is. If you want to reach out to a large population, that is the platform. It's covering almost 1/3 of the human population on planet Earth. At the same time, it also creates an environment where people like I'm on a lot of groups, which are like private groups. They are private only for other people, but Facebook has access to all information and they can very easily interact with that. So while those people are also aware of the challenges and risks, but somehow they have made a compromise with a trade-off. They are willing to risk that in lieu of what they get in return. And I would actually love if Facebook spins off their VR division as a totally separate company, but the problem is they won't do that. With the VR, they actually get to scan my room. They know where I am. They know every settings. So
and have they built up that trust to you? I'd argue that's the last company in the world I would let into my house.
No, that's where I'm going. But the problem is that when it's come to VR, and if you're an enthusiast, that is the only platform that is out there today. Same is the case with all of us get excited about the self-driving cars, Tesla. If you, I don't know how many of us are Tesla fans. I am Tesla fan, but if you look at some of the tweets of Elon Musk, you would not be a big fan of that guy, But the thing is, he switches between the stances. And the whole, when the controversy in the Thailand happened with the kids were stuck and he called the driver a pedophile and all those things happened. And over times, the way he uses, at the same time, just imagine, let's say the whole world switches to self-driving cars and suddenly you want to drive to Washington, D.C. to protest against a dystopian government. And your car doesn't drive you there. They will not allow you to drive there. The law enforcement authorities will say you cannot drive. So you have to understand, we are living in the tech world, IT world, and things are not controlled by us anymore, by someone else. When I open Google Maps, I do know Google knows everything where we are going, but at the same time, it tells me the shortest route that I can take to drop my child to his school instead of getting late. So I think there are trade-offs, but where do we draw the line? And that's where I think our politicians or our governments come into a picture where they should be the ones to protect our privacy, because there are a lot, like Amazon knows where I live physically. They have but we still buy from Amazon, So we have to come up with regulations where companies can use our information to improve the services, but there should be a limit to what it can be. Just because they can doesn't mean they should.
That's some of the European models work well for that.
Container Journal reports that the Technical Oversight Committee of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, of course CNCF, voted to accept the operator framework as an incubation level project. As you know, CNCF has different level of project. Incubation is where the project enter, and then they go through the process, and then they graduate. But the interesting thing is most of these projects that are coming into incubation are already being used in the industry. Is that they want to just move. These are already projects that are being used inside companies, and then they open source it, and then they contribute it to the CNCF or any other foundation. The operator framework is an open source toolkit for managing Kubernetes native application called operators in an automated and scalable way. Because I remember in the beginning you were saying the Kubernetes piece was missing from the AWS story, and even I have so many discussion in weeks, and Kubernetes people say, though Linus Torvalds doesn't agree with that Kubernetes is the new Linux. But the funny thing is, to run Kubernetes, you need Linux, which is running underneath. So Linus told me that, well, it's not, but the thing is, the way Linux has become successful, so whenever you want to say that your project is as successful as Linux, you just call it Linux of XYZ.